Everything is perfectly understood. At least how strange was a man, this Heidegger, is known by your idea. Okay? But the applications of such a thinking turns out to be quite interesting. For instance, now I'm going to talk about an article. Actually, I talk about that article in another course as well. Which proves that it turns out to be very interesting for me. Therefore, I included here too. Actually, a series of articles, but only I'm going to talk about just one. Maybe at the end of this session, I'm going to add some few remarks from a later article as well. Okay? The article I'm talking about is written by Heidegger in 1938. With the title, The Age of World Picture. Okay. Okay, I'm going to make a simple quotation from the article, just only once, and later on try to elaborate what this quotation implies, what the major elements of that article was, and how it deals with certain sociological, very important sociological questions. Okay, the quotation is here, follows. That quotation you are familiar with from Sociology of Knowledge. Metaphysics grounds an age in which that through a specific interpretation of what is and through a specific comprehension of truth, it gives to that age the basis upon which it is essentially formed. This basis holds complete dominion over all the phenomena that distinguish that age. Okay? Conversely, in order that there may be an adequate reflection upon the phenomena themselves, the metaphysical basis for them must let itself be apprehended in them. Okay? Reflection is the courage to make the truth of our own presuppositions and the realm of our own goals into the things that most deserve to be called in question. Okay. That is one of the second paragraph, as far as I remember, from the article. Okay, here is a strange presupposition, which at the first sight may seem to you quite idealistic. Okay, metaphysics grounding an age, and so on and so forth. When he says metaphysics, actually, we have seen other examples of this attitude in the history of sociology. For instance, you may remember an Auguste Comte. Auguste Comte referring to the ages of humanity, okay? Religio-mythical age, metaphysical age, and then positive age, and so on, okay? So dividing or describing the age on the basis of a certain concept, mentality, okay? Therefore, such a classification, such a reading of history can also be identified as idealistic. After all, everything has been explained on the basis of the organization of the ideas in human mind, okay? So that's why it's called idealistic. And another example could be what? That was a very beautiful another example as well. Okay, I don't remember the other example. In contradistinction to position, we had the example of Karl Marx saying that consciousness of man is determined by the material conditions under which they are living, etc. Okay, so these counterpositions actually can be understood by bringing them into a relation with each other, and we can interpret this metaphysics in connection to this as well. But when we a little bit delve into the article, we will find that this is not the case. Heidegger is talking about quite something else, quite another. Actually, what he was talking about, that very ground itself. Okay. Now, the term may sound strange to you, talking about the ground of an age. Okay. The term ground has strange connotations. It also means reason. And it also means raison d'être, what the French call as raison d'être. Okay? The very reason that this something is here. Okay? But Heideggerian arguments will go a little bit beyond this and presents us with a strange problematic in his description. Actually, he takes this from ancient Greek term hypokeimenon. I've introduced you in the earlier session. Which a term we usually translate as subject, as you know. Okay. Now, this turns out to be strange simply because we have seen that Heidegger was trying to reject the modern conceptualization of subject at the same time. Okay? He did replace that subject with something vague and strange term, okay, Dasein, being there, okay, and he is talking about Daseins being there in its there-ness, etc. Okay, the strange relationship. So it appears that the usage of such a term later on Heidegger will replace Dasein with another term, mortal, less exotic term, mortals. He's going to talk about us, human beings, with this term later on. Yet, not yet, at the time when he wrote that article, okay? A little bit later on, he replaced this. Okay, what kind of strange relationship that subject, which is ground and Dasein, can enter into? You know, our usual proposition, as it was always, we tend to think, okay, human beings are the subjects. And after all, Heidegger himself, cutting a very specific and important role for Daseins being there, for that being, it can give itself away. Huh? Fine. Okay. But speaking of Dasein rather than subject, has one function here, as you can see, okay? It detaches the subject from hypokeimenon. From then on, Heidegger would translate this as the gathering ground. There are alternative other translations, better formulations, but longer, so I prefer this one, okay? Actually, when Heidegger says that metaphysics ground an age, okay, he is identifying metaphysics with this ground, as you can see. Okay, metaphysics grounds an age, and a ground is that which characterizes an age, okay, a period in history. Okay, Heidegger in this article alternatively make 3, 4, or 5. How many is not important. In different articles, 5. In some article, 3. When, at what point in time, it's not important as well. But the idea is important. Okay. Heidegger here in this article brings forth kind of history of the ground of existence. Okay. If you like, history of the hypokeimenon. Hypokeimenon is at stake. Okay, and the terms that I already mentioned to you, episteme, scientia, science. Okay. Let's take it simple. Let's assume that only there are 3 stages, actually 4 or 5, as I told you. Okay. This corresponding to the age of the ancient Greeks. This corresponding to medieval scholasticism, okay, medieval ages, okay, and of course this corresponding to our modern times. Okay. So the presupposition is that the ground for each these different ages of the world, okay, the ground is different. There was a different ground. The ground is the very important thing. This is, we are no longer in the domain of epistemology, etc. Okay, we are directly in the domain of ontology. If you like, the very organization of being, or if you like, the very coming together of the things as to constitute a world in an age. Okay, so what's at stake here? Okay, the idea is that in these different ages, actually, this is what make them different from each other. Okay, the things or bringing together of things were different. Okay, the organization, the coexistence of the things, the mode or modality of their being together there in the world were different. Now, okay, say we have been organized in this corporation, they have been organized in the state apparatus somewhere, some directorate or whatever it is, ministry. Okay, the others are organizing themselves in that village, the others getting organized in that marketplace, etc., etc. What's the difference? Okay, different organization implying different modalities, prevailing different modalities of being related to with others, you know. But, you know, in each and every case, it's we, you or you, okay, you in the marketplace, you in the hospital, the other one is this municipality, the other one, others here in the school, etc. So, getting related with each other a la school, so to speak, as things get in relation with each other within a school environment. But in each and every case, you could say that, okay, in each and every case, these are the same individual human beings. If not the same individual, similar individuals. Okay, so what makes that big difference? Okay, but the problem, the ground, the importance of ground here is such that it is this very modality of organizing things, getting things together, which characterizes the whatness of the things. Okay? So, what makes them what they are, in other words, okay, or appear as they appear right now, okay, is that very modality of being together with other things. Okay? Now, this is a strange idea. Therefore, actually, this is why we are talking about ontology, okay? The very mode of coming together of the things, productive, is understood as if something productive and producing the very things which it gathers. Therefore, it's called gathering ground. Heidegger prefers to translate this hypokeimenon as the gathering ground. It is the ground, in other words, upon which particular things, entities, make their appearances. Without that ground, in other words, those things would not appear. Now, you can see, for instance, that in the first book, in 1926-7, we have been introduced with the idea that it was Dasein. It was Dasein itself, which offers that clearance, that openness, that disclosedness into which being gives itself. However, now, here, we had another comprehension, now overcoming that centrality of the anthropomorphic approach in being and time. Now, you can see, Dasein had been detached from that hypokeimenon, that ground. It is the clearance itself, okay? It is the clearance itself upon which things show themselves. But this time, understood in its historicity as if something detached from being human. Now, here, let's talk about these three states, okay? These three states correspond, as you can see, quite Eurocentric something here. Starting history with ancient Greek world, okay? And then continuing it with the Roman and the European medieval age, and then culminating in the Western world. Again, it's quite Eurocentric, as you can see. So therefore, the particulars of the argument may not be that important, apart from that last part, which succeeded in spreading itself all over the world and presenting itself as the ground for each and every one of us, whether we are Westerners or not. Okay, it does not no longer make any difference. If up to here we were talking about the specific history of the West, right or wrong, it's not important again. Okay, here we are talking about the present situation, effective globally all over the world. Okay. Actually, you can see the implications of this discussion in more sociological discussions of the question of modernity, multiple modernities, one modernity, one model for modernity, which is nothing other than Western, or there are the possibility of talking about different modernities, non-Western modernities, etc. Okay? Actually, here, this says that this last phase, okay, is so over-determinant all over the world, it's meaningless to talk about any other modernities. Okay? There's only one single modernity which has been originated in the West and now affecting everywhere in the world. Okay? And it is quite difficult to escape from its grasp. Why? Because it has assumed the power of the ground. Okay? In other words, because it functions as the very principle of things being together. Okay? Therefore, producing the whatness of the things themselves, on the other hand. Okay? Okay, let's see. Heidegger says that here, actually, okay, let me write here hypokeimenon. Don't forget, its meaning is the gathering ground upon which things show themselves. Okay? So for ancient Greece, Heidegger would say that what was hypokeimenon was physis. Translated into modern English as nature. Okay? But of course, one should not understand physis as we understand the modern term nature today. Okay? No, it's something quite different, quite specific to the Greeks. You know, this nature, for instance, containing all those supernatural forces of Greek mythology at the same time. Okay, demiurgs, gods, big gods, minor gods, etc., interacting with each other, other forces, mysterious forces, natural forces, and human being together. Okay, and Heidegger would say that in this mass of physis, human beings were just another participant. Okay, they were participating into the world of physis, just like other beings in that world were partaking in it. Okay, so it gives us a different modality of existence, where everything, all of nature, all the entities making their appearances were different from our world. Okay. As for the medieval age, as you can understand, it has been characterized by Christianity in the West, Islam in the East, and therefore characterized by a religious outlook. But it is not enough. What we are talking about is not the outlook, how the human beings think about themselves and about their worlds, etc. No, what we are concerned with, the conditions upon which things can appear or not appear. Okay, and here it is through God. Okay, the hypokeimenon was God Himself. Okay, it is on God things can exist. Even the term creature, you know, creation, creature, human beings was a creature. There were other creatures, etc. All making their reference back to God. Okay. Calling something creation, something created. You know, created by whom? Created by God, of course. Okay, we are the creatures of God, and everything can only come into this world under the condition of being created by God and disappear from this world if God wills it. Otherwise, it stays. Okay, everybody, God wills, and things happen. Okay. But as for the modern age, Heidegger would say in this article that human beings with modernity have taken over hypokeimenon onto themselves. Okay. Actually, another way of saying, which is much more familiar through, was that through modernity, human beings had taken the place of God, replaced the God, okay, in the earlier worldview. So from now on, it appears that from now on, everything exists through the immediacy of the human being. Okay? It is this moment human being turns out to be the subject in history. Okay, not before that. Okay, for the first time in history, at least this rather shortened version of Western history, for the first time, subject and human being overlaps. Okay. In those previous ages, for instance, in the medieval age, you know, human beings being the creations of God, made in the image of God himself, okay, can only explain their existence and their activities on the face of the earth in relation to this theological doctrine. Okay. Whatever we were doing or not doing, again, had its reference in this theological doctrine. Now we have lost this. Okay. Now, however, this interesting activity, it's not an activity actually, it is something which simply happens. But if you follow Heideggerian interpretation, you will find still traces that Heidegger thinks that, implications that Heidegger thinks that this is the result of the doings of the human beings. And throughout all time, actually, all those warnings, all those Heideggerian calls us to remember back the question of being, etc., was simply related by all this. Okay. We have assumed the position of the hypokeimenon, and this is a very important event and very important consequences. Okay. So from then on starts a certain critique of modernity. Okay. Okay, when we take a look at first glance, it appears to be something good. Indeed, wasn't it this which has been hailed by the supporters of the Enlightenment in its time? Okay. So remember Kant saying, for instance, answering to the question of what is enlightenment. He was saying that enlightenment is that intellectual maturity in which human beings can make their own decisions, especially about those matters, important matters, their own decisions, only with their own reason and without taking recourse to nobody else's reason, okay? Especially on those matters of faith, okay? What the world is, what's the meaning of our being here, etc. In these matters, okay, enlightenment was that intellectual maturity of depending our own reason. So this was an effort to cancel out the importance of the voice of the authority being the church fathers, the elders, okay, saying, this is this, and my son, you gotta believe in me. Okay. No, the enlightened man would say, according to Kant's expectations, no, let me decide by myself, but first let me think about it. Okay. There was the enlightenment. But Kant was also unable to call his age as an enlightened age, noticing or without failing not to notice, so to speak, okay, that alas, the overwhelming majority of men are not capable of intellectual maturity. Okay. The overwhelming majority of men, in other words, cannot make their own minds depending upon their own reason. So they are not, in other words, intellectually mature. And we see that in that article, Kant lays his hopes, he calls his age the age of enlightenment, and meaning that this is not an enlightened age. So within this framework, as you can see, at least for Kant, the last enlightened Enlightenment thinker, okay? Enlightenment was something desirable. Okay, we wanted this position, in other words, okay? And we succeeded in bringing ourselves into this position. From now on, it is human being around which the world turns. Now, from now on, the situation is exactly like how Heidegger describes it in his Being and Time. Okay? Dasein is the center. Dasein is that very opening in which being can use itself. Okay? Dasein is the hypokeimenon. Fine. And in this modern age, he elaborates 5 basic essential phenomena. Okay? The first of which is science. Okay? So modern age is primarily characterized as science. Okay? The second one, which would prove to be the clue to the overcoming of this hypokeimenon, is machine technology. Okay? Actually, he understands by this term not a mere application of science to praxis, but machine technology is an autonomous transformation of praxis. This will be an important clue for the following article, okay? And consists the essence of modern metaphysics. Okay? Modern technology, not science. Strange enough, already in 1937, Heidegger presents technology as the ground of the modern metaphysics, okay, essence of the modern metaphysics. Modern metaphysics, when is it? Modern hypokeimenon, okay, modern ground. So it is not ideas we are talking when we are talking here about metaphysics, okay. And the third one, the third phenomena of our modern age is arts moving into the domain of aesthetics. You know, this is also a strange description of the situation, simply because, when we ask the question, what is art? It immediately gives itself away to us that art is already related with aesthetics. Art is a matter of aesthetics. Well, Heideggerian analysis had already shown in several other places that art had nothing to do with this, okay? By the sense we understand the term today. Okay? When we understand the term today, we understand the fine arts. Well, here, art, actually, the English translation of ancient Greek techne, had nothing to do with fine arts, you know. In its most practical sense, we could translate it, actually, techne, as know-how. Okay? Knowing, the knowledge of doing something. You know, the coppersmith knows how to work with copper. Okay? So this is techne of the coppersmith. Okay? So coppersmith is called the artisan, art, you know, artisan. It's called artisan. It is, this art was indeed in that older sense of the English term art, which is much more connected with the artificial, with what is done, rather than what is given, okay? Rather than any idea of fine arts. Therefore, it had no relationship with the question of aesthetics. The term aesthetics itself. Again, what we have here is an ancient Greek term, aestheton, okay, aesthesis, is simply meaning something related with the senses, okay, sensation. 5 senses, you know, seeing, hearing, etc. It was all related with this, and if I would translate aestheton into modern English today, I'd rather prefer the term sensibility. It had nothing to do with this aesthetics, modern aesthetics. What is modern aesthetics? What do we understand by the term? Actually, it hides something mystical which the modern mind secretly attributes to the artwork, the works of fine art. Some certain beauty, some mystical something which we cannot name, which we cannot put our finger on, that we have claimed to find in that artwork, okay? In that piece of music, in that piece of painting, in that piece of whatever it is. Okay? However, it had nothing to do with it, and in contemporary world, it increasingly lost, in essence, its real meaning, its real value, and acquired a new value. You know, we still use the same term, but they are not the same. To what they refer are no longer the same, actually having no relationship with it at all. Okay? That was the third one. And fourth one, the fourth phenomenon of the modern world is the transformation of human activity or understanding of human activity as culture. Okay. The total sum of human activity now began to be interpreted as culture, and culture is understood as the realization of the highest values through the cultivation of the highest goals of man. Okay? And finally, Heidegger talks about, reminiscent of Max Weber, okay, loss or withdrawal of the gods from the world, God or gods. Okay? So these five phenomena characterizes, according to him, what the modern hypokeimenon is about. Okay? And the modern hypokeimenon was the human being. Okay? For the first time in history, human being identical with the hypokeimenon. Okay? Taking the hypokeimenon onto itself. However, one should also add that this theme of the loss of or withdrawal of the gods from the modern world has nothing to do with those propositions of modernity in relation to the question of religion. You know, the basic expectation was that when modernity comes into the picture, it tends to disintegrate all the pre-existing forms, including kinship ties, including, for instance, traditional kinds of family, traditional market or production relations, traditional patterns of consumption, etc., and replace them with the modern ones. And so, thinking this proposition in relation to the question of religion, it has already been suggested that when modernity shows itself, religion will withdraw. Okay? Gradually withdraw. However, in 1937, Heidegger has something to say about it, and he says that this loss of gods is far from excluding religiosity. Okay? Rather, only through that loss, the relation to the gods changed into mere religious experience. Actually, there is a strange expression in here. Heidegger seems to say that what we call nowadays within modern context as a religious experience can only be possible in this age. It was not in the earlier age. In the earlier age, you know, all the organization of the things, their being together, their mode of being together were different, and so there was no such question of religious experience. Religious experience, according to Heidegger, therefore, quite a new phenomenon, actually so important, so that it is so powerful to be counted by Heidegger as the five essential phenomena, one of the five essential phenomena which he uses to characterize modern age. Okay? So loss of gods is not the withdrawal of religion. Loss of the gods is becoming possible of the religious experience itself. Okay? If you think about the rise of the religion, then within the context of this article, for instance, you may need to locate that phenomenon in a rather different problematization than what has been suggested, say, for the arguments developed by or based upon the concept of the return of the repressed. So for Heidegger, the new modern religiosity cannot be understood in terms of the return of the repressed, but rather it should be thought within the context of the modern hypokeimenon, the organization of the modern hypokeimenon. Okay, so from then on, he primarily concentrates on the essence of the modern science in the article, okay? And tries to show us the metaphysical ground of modern science, and metaphysical ground is this, okay? So we are not talking about the ideological outlook of the people prevalent in an age, etc., okay? But rather, ontological organization, being togetherness of the things, okay? And it says that, as different from the Greek episteme or doctrina or scientia of the Middle Ages, modern science, the essence of the modern science, he says, actually he gives this in a rather sudden fashion, he says, research. What do we understand by research? And are we able to imagine any practice of knowing apart from research? Knowing which can be acceptable by the higher institutions of education, for instance, like universities, apart from research. Okay, what do you think about this? Let's a little bit have a discussion here, a short one. Do you know any other mode of knowing which is not connected with research? For instance, a few pages later, Heidegger will say that actually the older type scholar had disappeared, being replaced by something like Lyotard had said, okay, being replaced by the researcher as the technician. Çok yaşa. Okay, so this term scholar at least can give us a hint of the existence of a known type of an academician, which, at least for Heidegger, being replaced by the researcher. Okay? Now the researcher turns out to be the main type of the academy. Scholar, researcher. What kind of difference can you imagine between the two? The same old stuff, okay? There is no such new thing in this. What is a scholar and what is the contemporary academician? A scholar, the idea of the scholar actually is primarily based upon that same model we have talked about when we were discussing Lyotard's position. And it was a modern ideal, actually, okay? And in similar articles, such articles, not only Heidegger, Lyotard as well, Foucault from other sides, others, Adorno and Horkheimer, who making a fuss about it, etc., okay? Was that all these men were talking about a loss of certain something, okay? A something disappearing, a world disappearing or being replaced by another world in the face of which they felt some kind of uneasiness, okay? They didn't like what's happening. For instance, remember the title of that book, okay, by Horkheimer, Eclipse of Reason. Okay? Horkheimer and Adorno, Dialectic of Enlightenment, Culture Industry, and similar others. At that period, such discussions were quite flourishing, and everybody expressing such kind of uneasiness in this changing world, changing, if you like, hypokeimenon. Things began to be organized in a rather different way, and the reference to technology was always there in their discussions. Yani, so much so that sometimes it surprises me how everybody had arrived such a strict agreement on this. Everybody pointing to technology, okay, machine technology. They were a couple of years ago, some 50 years ago, referring to machine technology. Now we were referring to information technology, okay? But still technology is this there, and technology actually was related with this. Technology, okay, the same term, okay? So tekne, the older tekne, know-how, began to be understood as fine arts today. It is an interesting transformation. Okay, so I'm not gonna go much detail, more or less similar to how Lyotard argued the problem of this replacement of the type scholar. But I'm gonna say only this. Despite the common agreement in all those critiques of modernity, with reference to that loss of the scholar, actually, we began nowadays, within the context, actually, let me put it this way, within the context of Hasan Ünal Nalbantoğlu symposiums, we have taken this issue several times, and several other people offered us very beautiful discussions of the concept. Okay, so gradually we came to realize that actually that scholar was nothing else than an idea on the first place. Okay, it was an idea developed within the confines of modernity. It was not pre-modern something, and its origin can be led back to actually to that establishment or foundation of the Berlin University by Humboldt. Okay. So it was the model of the modern university, and the stuff of that university was conceptualized in the form of the scholars. Actually, after the example of Protestant ethic, hardworking, only responsible towards truth and nothing else, etc., etc., the individual. And one important characteristic is that that type scholar was capable of being knowledgeable in every possible field of knowledge. So it was a polymath, so to speak, okay? In contrast to us, who had been specialized in different branches of knowledge, okay? So specialization creates an interesting effect, an effect which makes itself felt as a loss, okay? And this loss is the loss of the ability to conceive this knowledge as the parts of one single totality, okay? And this is the result of increasing specialization, diversification of the tasks, etc., etc., as you can imagine, okay? And also he gives us that the possibility of knowing establishes itself in this modern hypokeimenon as procedure, and conceives procedure by procedure something slightly different from method or methodology, but something containing both a claim for rigorousness as well as method. Okay, rigorousness is an important fact, and according to Heidegger, it is the rigor of the sciences. What is rigor? Türkçesini bilen var mı? Ne? Ne? Detay. Detayla daha çok ilgili. Detaya verilen önem ve detayın üzerine kurulan sağlamlık arasında. Rigor of the sciences. It's their strength. Strength coming out of giving emphasis to the detailed work. Okay? Rigor of the science. And he would say that actually in the modern world, what produces facts or facticity is this rigor of the sciences. Okay? Rigor of the sciences produces things. Okay? Another interesting claim, simply because we usually assume that things are already there. And we are not, it's not us producing those things over there. Things are already there. All our task is to go out there and to study those things which are already there. Now somebody is saying that things have been put there by that rigor of the sciences. Okay? And he would also say that, if you are interested in this question, the rigor of the social sciences should necessarily be different from the rigor of the natural sciences and much more difficult to establish. Okay. Another important characteristics of science as the phenomenon, essential phenomenon of the modern age, is that it is, in connection with this rigor and procedure, of course, it is what established the world in the form of representation. Okay. Now, previously, in earlier hypokaimena, so to speak, okay, actually the world did not show itself, if we follow the Heideggerian argument, in the form of representation. But since the human being had assumed the character of hypokaimenon, okay, by the way, what's character of the hypokaimenon? Okay, shall we take a closer look at what hypokaimenon is? It may seem to you quite a mystic something. It's not. It's simply related with these two. We have talked about earlier, actually. Acting and being acted upon. That's all. Okay. That's all which constitutes as the ground and which lets things appear on it. Okay. Nothing else. That's simple something. Okay. Things are acting upon other things, and other things acting upon other things, and this being so. And this is the meaning of saying that, okay, their mode of being together determines what they are. Simply because, as you see, I have not pointed out in this simple formula to the things themselves. There are no things in themselves, only actings and being acted upon. Okay, what is acting upon what? Nobody knows. Everything is known, or what constitutes a phenomenon are not the things hypokaimenon, okay, but rather the togetherness of these actings and being acted upon. That's all. Okay, or you know, this action, poiein, related with poetics. Later on, Heidegger would turn his face towards poetics, and when he does so, you would understand that he would turn poetics as one of the fine arts. No. Poetics is the noun form of this verb, poiein, acting. Okay. So action. Okay, poetry is action. Okay, nothing else. Okay, doings. And today, for instance, this second element began to be popularized under the generic sociological title, Sociology of Affects, being influenced by Spinoza's thinking. Affects, Türkçe'de yanılmıyorsam duygular sosyolojisi diye çeviriyor. It has nothing to do with emotions, but okay. It is rather doing something with this aestheton, sensibility, okay. Simply because it is nothing else the translation of the ancient Greek term again here. I write paskein. This is the verb form, but perhaps you are more familiar with the noun form. Pathos. Okay. Actually can also be translated into English by the word passions. Passions of Jesus Christ, okay, or affect, okay, or pain, suffering at the same time, or even agony. If you are interested in contemporary debates in sociology, for instance, you may have heard about the rise of a certain sociology again of agony, agonistic sociology. Okay. So it is related with this paskein. Okay. So the hypokaimenon is nothing else. It is not something actually. It is this paskein and poiein. That's all. Okay. All the existing paskein and poiein, or acting or being acted upon, coming together and constituting a ground, and that ground is a material ground, a solid ground. Okay. Simply because what takes place in this acting and being acted upon is nothing else than what Heidegger calls as, let me remember, what has been brought to pass upon. Or in the more easiest terminology would say, coming into being. And this is all actual. Okay, so therefore, metaphysics, grounds, and age is not an idealistic statement. It's quite referring directly to this actual ground. An actual ground upon which things become what they are. Okay, this is why this is a question of ontology rather than epistemology. You know, if the difference between the two is the difference between things being, on the one hand, ontology, and our appreciation of the things, you know, consciousness, which has been made by the material conditions of man. So it's not a matter of consciousness. Okay. Okay, so this situation and transformation together, rigor and methodology, actually their togetherness has been labeled by the term procedure in Heideggerian discussion, okay, brings about, or the fixedness of the facts and the constantness of their change comes to pass. Okay. So this is interesting simply because, you know, that ground is interesting. Things always happening continuously without ceasing. But we are in the modern age. Modern comes from the Latin term modus, modo, okay, which simply means now. Okay. So it means that modernity, if understood in terms of a historical period, for instance, refers to a certain age where everything is now and registered under the label novelty, new. Okay. But this newness of the things can only show itself on this ground. You know, everything is alive, everything is acting and being acted upon. Okay. So all these acting and being acted upon should be bound by a certain law, laws of nature if you like, okay, should be bound by a certain law, and in reference to this law, novelty turns out to be possible to make its own appearance in the form of the new. Okay. So this is the character of the modern age. Binding existing something under the strong grasp of the law, okay, natural law, historical laws, sociological laws, whatever you like to call them, and in reference or in contradistinction to this law, only and only in relation to this, comes to perceive new, what is new, what makes its appearance as the novelty on that ground. Okay. You know, simply because all these actings, things are continuously happening. If they are left by themselves, there would be no room for making the distinction between old and new, okay? So one needs to bind them in a rather strong fashion, okay? Fixing them in their place, in other words, okay? To be able to discern what shows itself in the horizon as the new. This is why our age called the age of the new, okay? Modernity. It's very meaning. Okay. Fine, what else? There are lots of things in the article, and I strongly recommend you to read it, but I am looking for some other points which is worth to be mentioned here. Okay. Of course, there is that important point when it comes to the problem of the discussion of the essence of the modern age. Heidegger says that in this new age of ours, man frees himself from the bonds of the Middle Ages in freeing himself to himself. Okay. Therefore, this age also can be characterized by the proliferation of the subjectivism, individualism, and at the same time objectivism. Okay. The strange point was that, okay, you are now the very ground itself Erecting, however, as different from the earlier grounds, erecting the world before you in the form of a representation. Okay? This is the meaning of the age of the world picture. Okay? Man locating himself into the position of the hypokeimenon. In other words, functioning as the very ground, determining the coming into being and passing away of the things into and from this world. Okay? So man conditions the things, how they appear, in what sense they appear, whether they appear or not appear at all, okay, in this new age. And the one peculiar characteristic of this new age is, through the scientific practice, representation. Okay? The world assumes the form of representation, a form of a picture, painting before us. In other words, before us, objectum, okay, in contradistinction to the subjectum. Okay, we as subjects, as the ground, okay, erecting the world before us as the object, that which stands or lays before. Okay, if subject was that which lays beneath, object itself was that which lays or stands before. Okay, that was the age of subjectivity, therefore, as well as the age of objectivity. Now, in that connection, let me remind you that gloomy conclusion arrived by Baudrillard, for instance, declaring that man has lost its position and the positions of the subject and object had been replaced. Okay, the objects becoming now subjects and man losing his position of the subject, now turning into being an object. The difficulty with this was this, okay? Man's becoming a subject was a matter of the hypokeimenon. Modern age begins to dissolve in the thin air and began to be replaced by another hypokeimenon, if you like, whose terms, however, the difficulty in the Baudrillardian discussion, whose terms can no longer be the same. Okay, so the simple replacement of the positions of the subject and object is not possible. The subject, man as subject, yes, disappears, but instead of this, man as object does not show itself. The situation was rather, and parallel to this article of Heidegger, can be understood better if you follow Michel Foucault's argumentation in the order of things, for instance. With modernity, for the first time, remember that, okay, man makes its appearance both as the subject of knowledge and as well as the very object of that knowledge. Okay, so man was both subject and object, and here Heidegger, for Heidegger, man withdraws itself from the world and creates a dichotomy, a distancing from the world, okay, as well as the very ground of man's inauthentic being in the world, okay, the form of man's inauthentic being in the world, okay. So the world and the man, human being, distances itself, and world makes its appearance before the human as the object, okay. That is the not so much gloomy conclusion arrived by Heidegger here in this article, but some 9 years later, he continues to pursue this question and writes 3 more articles in 1947. Okay, this was 1938, and in 1947, just after the war, World War II. Okay. The article I'm going to talk about, only one I'm going to talk about, carries the title, The Question Concerning Technology. Now, as you may remember here, even in this 1937 or 38 article, technology or machine technology had occupied a special place of interest. Okay. However, it constitutes the basis of that second article or second series of articles, where Heidegger presents technology as if something acquiring its autonomy from man's being, existence, human being's existence. Okay. Now, you know, in the 1937 article, it was still man. And this article was much more in accord with what he had discussed in 1927, being anti. Okay? You know, Dasein, scattering, diffusing itself all over existence in the form of ecstasis. Ecstasis meaning being outside of itself, always and all the time. Okay? However, here, man again presented, but this time man presented again as center, but this time the central position of man become the topic of the critique. Okay, Heidegger criticizes this and shows that, discusses that this central position is nothing else than due to the coming together or bringing together of the modern hypokaimenon, okay, which brings forth as well man's alienation from himself and from the world as well, and the objectification of the world in the very hands of the man, so on, okay. And in the third article, however, what we see, the loss of that central position on the part of the man and replacement or coming to the foreground of the question of technology. Now, this time, technology has been discussed as if it is something autonomous and as if it is something capable of operating against and contrary to human being itself as well, okay? You know, when we think about technology, we usually tend to think that technology is at our own service, okay? It is us still who can decide whether we are going to use cell phones, computers or not, etc. Okay, but Heidegger says this, he talks quite in a strange voice and says that the essence of technology is nothing to do with technology. Okay, the essence of technology actually is nothing else than Gestalt. Usually translated into English as enframing. Okay? And the characteristic of technological gestalt is that, okay, it challenges things. Heidegger uses strange terminology, as I said. Yeah, what can it mean, this term, challenge things? And he says that it even challenges human beings as well. Okay? It calls human beings and things before itself, okay, and challenge them and enframes them, okay, making them, actually taking them from what they were and making them into forms of standing reserve. This is a strange term again, okay, standing reserve. For what? Okay. Standing reserve for what? The interesting point in this article is that things or the happening of things do not carry any relevance any longer with our own destiny, okay? The operation of the things do not care about us, okay? We turn out to be, again, one among many things, okay? Just like a certain river, a certain other standing reserve, human beings also assume the form of standing reserve, ready to be called if there any need be, okay? For production or for whatever else. Okay. The interesting point again is that production had always been thought of within modern context, always in relation to human needs. Okay. Yeah, and why should we produce at all? Okay, why should we produce this thing, for instance? If not to satisfy one certain need, get warm in the middle of the winter. Okay, and its being there, we tend to think that its being there is due to our being here as human beings, okay? But the problem with technology and its enframing is that things are no longer organized in this way, in this technological world of enframing, okay? Rather, even human beings, for instance, production to be able to satisfy human needs. No longer production is about satisfying the human needs, okay? Production turns out to be an ongoing process, operating by itself without requiring any reason whatsoever related with human existence or not, okay? Working through its own directionality, caring no longer about human beings, and in the meantime, as its essence, okay, technology is enframing, translating or reforming the human being in another standing reserve, a stock of energy. This is an evil. However, this article, we are not sure we should read this series of articles as if Heidegger now presenting us with a discussion of postmodernity, okay? We are not sure, for instance, technology and its enframing turn out to be the new hypokaimenon, replacing the modern hypokaimenon, and therefore we are not sure, are we going to think about a new shuffling and reorganization of things and a change, drastic change in the modality of their being together in this new world. However, the tune of the argument indicates that Heidegger was producing in that, proceeding in that direction, and actually it happens that that problem of technology proves itself to be one of the most decisive problems in Heideggerian thinking. Actually, Heidegger, for instance, after the war, when he was blamed by Nazism, he would defend himself by saying that his association with the Nazi Party during the 1933-35, okay, he assumes the position of rectorate, for instance, the Nazi rector of the Freiburg University and so on. He gives away certain Jew academicians, etc. So he was really guilty on that ground. Okay, but he says that his relationship with the Nazis was based upon that concern with technology. Okay, he says that he thought that the Nazi Party would turn out to be capable of fighting against this coming of technology and enframing of technology, okay? So after a couple of years, however, he says, he come to realize that the Nazis as well have yielded to the powers of this new rising technology and therefore cut his ties with the Nazi Party, okay? The problem of technology continues to be an important problem, and I don't know, I'm not sure, I don't know. I'm quite dubious about this question of technology. I'm asking myself whether this question of technology is there to hide something much more important and much more hideous, okay? Hiding itself from our gaze by keeping itself behind technology. Something what? And I don't know whether it's a legitimate question to ask what characterizes our age, for instance. I don't know as well whether such questions are sociological or not. But one thing is certain, that we want to know what kind of world we are living in. And we are making attempts, okay? Somebody says it is this kind, somebody else says it is that other kind, etc. And we try to assess the value of those claims, go there, research, compare our findings with these claims, and trying to modify these claims, etc. But I don't know, really, I'm not sure about it, whether it's even a legitimate question to ask that. It appears that, interesting point, sociology no longer prefers to ask such questions, okay? One time, such questions were decisive for sociological research. Max Weber, Emil Durkheim, those names, that fathers of sociology, they were not only the fathers of sociology, and if you ask me, they are not only historical figureheads. They have still a lot to tell us, even today. And their studies and their comprehension of their period goes much further than ours. Okay? So do not take them lightly. They have very important things to say. And I guess it turns out to be important to try to penetrate what we are undergoing here, right now, in this country, in this world, in this age of ours. Okay? That's enough for the time being, I guess.